The San Francisco 49ers have made NFL history this free agency period with players they have let go and in regards to players they have brought in, all involving how much has been spent. Now, it's been well documented that the San Francisco 49ers have lost a lot of players in free agency. You can see some of them on the screen. Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, you've got Charvarius Ward. Obviously, they let go of Leonard Floyd, Javon Hargrave, Malik Collins, Kyle Juszczyk. I mean, the list goes on and on. I think even just now we saw that Demetrius Flanagan Fowles signed with the Giants. He was a key special team player for the 49ers since 2020. So just a lot of changes going on. We saw Aaron Banks signed with the Packers for massive money. We saw Jalen Moore become the Chiefs starting left tackle. We've seen a lot of moves. All right. So basically, as you can see on the screen, all of those signings, and this doesn't even include Demetrius Flanagan Fowles, who just signed a 1-year deal. This doesn't include Kyle Juszczyk. This doesn't include Deebo Samuel and his contract because that was a trade. With the player signings that have occurred, $321 million has been paid out to 49ers players this free agency period. That is absolutely wild. 321 million paid to 49ers players who were on the team just last year. So this is how it's going to be put into context. This was put out by Doug Clawson of CBS. Says other teams have spent 321 million on 49ers free agents this offseason, the most money spent on a team's departing free agents in NFL history through day 4 of free agency. SF has only spent 37 million on free agents, making it the largest free agency deficit, 284 million in NFL history by over 80 million. So let's put this all into context. Effectively, what he is saying is that not only is this the most money that other teams have spent on one team's players, but it's also the least amount of money that a team has spent on incoming free agents. And the deficit between how much money has been spent on their players versus how much money they have spent on new players is $284 million. And it exceeds the largest deficit by over $80 million. So, for 49er fans, we have heard a lot about the players coming and players going. So, if you feel like Will Smith here, if you feel like you're standing in a room and a lot of people have left, not a whole lot of guys have come in, you're right to feel that way because this is historic in regards to who has been paid and who the 49ers have paid to replace them. Now, obviously, there's more to the story than just that. This just encapsulates free agency. There's obviously still the draft coming up. The 49ers have brought in players, but the majority of these players are depth players or special team players, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Because the 49ers have just not been good on special teams for what feels like the majority of the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era. So we have seen them put emphasis on signing special teams players. Like we saw them sign George Odom. We saw them sign Oren Burks and guys like that. Those were special teams additions. But they're going all in. Like Trey Brown, special teamer. Richie Grant could be a special teamer. Trey Tomlinson, Luke Gifford. All of these guys can play special teams. So I guess that's one positive. We're building up the depth for special teams, and, I think when you look at the struggles of the 49ers special teams, I do believe it has a lot to do with talent. Because they haven't been successful in the drafts between 21 to 23, they didn't have depth. They didn't have good depth, and if you don't have good, like, bottom of the roster depth, that means your special teams players are significantly lesser than maybe some other teams who are just, like, guys who are waiting for their opportunity to play. These guys might not some of these guys might not even be on rosters in other on other teams. So, the thing is that even so, with this whole situation and the historic deficit in spending, the 49ers still have pretty good offense, all things considered, assuming they're going to be paying Brock Purdy, assuming they're going to extend George Kittle. When you look at what they have, you have Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Isaac Guerrero, Jordan Mason signed his or hasn't signed his tendered, but they tagged him with a second round tender. So you would assume those are going to be your top three running backs. Jawan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall. You signed to Marcus Robinson, who I like. I thought that was a great signing, all things considered. Obviously, he might have a DUI situation, but we'll have to figure that out. You hope Brandon Ayuk comes back. Isaiah Hodgins is, to me, a super underrated addition in the 49ers wide receiver room. We don't know what Tariq Owens is or if Russell Gage can be anything. And Jacob Cowan. We still don't know about what Jacob Cowan could be in year two. And then, of course, the 49ers signed a tight end too, and Luke Farrell's a good blocking tight end to hopefully come play behind George Kittle. And you look at the offensive line. If it's anchored by Trent Williams, you bring in Ben Barch. Ben Barch could absolutely start next year, and I do think he could actually be an upgrade over Aaron Banks. Jake Brendel still at center. You have Dominic Pooney, which you drafted, and then Colton McKivitz, who people just knock him way too much, way more than they need to. You also have guys like Matt Hennessy, Nick Zakelj, Spencer Burford, Drake Nugent, who could also play a role. So when you really look at the offense, not that much different. Like Deebo Samuel, I think we all were ready to move on from Deebo. Obviously, you don't have Kyle Juszczyk. Maybe Kyle Juszczyk returns. We'll see. But the offense hasn't changed all that much, if we're being honest. And I do think that they could continue to add pieces through the draft. Maybe they add an offensive lineman, a new center, something like that. And then we could see that offense take a step forward with healthy players. It's the defense right now that I think has most everyone concerned, and rightfully so, because of their defensive line. You got Nick Bosa, and then just a lot of bodies right now. Jordan Elliott is penned in to be your starting defensive tackle, along with Kevin Givens, who I do appreciate Kevin Givens. I think Kevin Givens is underrated. He was injured last year. You got Yetur Gross-Matos. I like Yetur Gross-Matos. I do believe Yetur could be take a much bigger role next year. I think we saw glimpses of that. He was just dealing with some health issues. Sam Okwuonu showed well in some spots. And then beyond that, you just got some depth, right? Kalia Davis, Robert Beal Jr., Drake Jackson, Jonathan Garvin, Taron Jackson, and Alex Barrett. So they just need more defensive tackles. So they're definitely going to be turning to the draft to hopefully fill those holes. You look at the linebacker room, you got Fred Warner. Hopefully, D. Winters takes a step forward. Jalen Graham is a promising prospect. Curtis Robinson, Luke Gifford, and don't forget Tatum Bethune. So they have at least a room. They can add to that room. A guy that I really like is Cal linebacker Teddy Buchanan. That to me looks like a Fred Warner clone. Who could be a guy who might start as a rookie. So you could look to the draft. There are options at linebacker. And when you look at cornerback, Diamador Lenore and Ronaldo Green, those are your top two guys. You bring in Trey Brown. Trey Brown has quite a bit of playing experience, a little bit injured last year. They were able to claim Trey Tomlinson. They got Darrell Luter Jr., Trey Avery, Chase Lucas. So they have bodies. They need some more corners. And then you look at the safety room where they have invested. You have Malik Mustafa going to be your starter. Jair Brown is penned in to be your starter right now, but he will also be, I believe, in competition with Jason Pinnock, who could potentially start over Jair Brown. And then you got Richie Grant, special teamer, George Odom still on the roster, Jalen Mahoney, Quindell Johnson. So honestly, when you hear that the 49ers are gutted, have been gutted in free agency, it feels worse than I think the actual overall state of the roster is. Now, cutting Malik Collins, cutting guys like what's his name? Signed with the Falcons. You know who I'm talking about. You'll let me know in the chat. Leonard Floyd. He like they're a couple pieces away. So could theoretically they find 2 starting defensive tackles in the draft? This is the draft to do it. This defensive tackle class is stacked. Could you find edge starters in this class? Absolutely. Could you find linebackers? Absolutely. Could you find cornerbacks? Absolutely. Go get a guy like Kobe Bryant out of Kansas. You could do that. You could find so the point being is, yes, it feels daunting right now. And yes, they have had historical mass exodus. But at the end of the day, as long as they execute this upcoming draft, and who knows if they're able to add anyone else, either via free agency, maybe potential trades, I don't think it's crazy to believe that this team still can't be competitive. Now, I'm not going to proclaim playoffs just yet. Playoffs? No, win your division first. Be able to beat the Rams, be able to beat the Seahawks, be able to beat the Cardinals. That's it. That's the measuring stick right now. We can worry about the playoffs later. So I don't think they're too far. I really don't. So I'm really curious to see how you guys feel kind of about the historic move, but kind of how I've kind of broken down the roster. What do you think about that? Do you think the 49ers are further away than maybe it may seem, or are they actually closer? So let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more updates.